All right, so welcome to Grizzly Creek State Park. My name's Fred, and I'm super excited you're here. Like I mentioned, I was a professor for like 30 years, but I always dreamed of having like a mahogany or cherry lined classroom like at Harvard or Oxford. But look at this classroom. It's redwood lined and they're alive, so I'm stoked out of my mind. And instead of just college students, now we have the full range from like Malcolm's to I get a lot of retired people coming into the park, and so it's just so wonderful getting that full spectrum. But tonight's talk is going to be focused more on the marbled merletes, which is endangered seabird that nest in old growth forest. And we did not even know that until 1974. People just wondered, where is this seabird nesting? And so before we get to that, one of the changes in the parks is land acknowledgement. And I am so stoked about this. And this is a map of Northern California. Oh, look at that. You got it. So we are in non-gadal land. Here's the river. We came up here that the Van Dusen runs through non-gadal land. And so the way most of these tribes work, and you're like, why are they carved out in such weird little shapes? Well, it had to do with watersheds. So for the non-gadal, like the top of that hill over there and the top of that hill over there, this is their valley. If you go over the mountain into the other watershed, that's somebody else's valley, and you're the guest. But this was a very peaceful area. Any ideas why there wasn't a lot of fighting or intertribal raiding up here? Yes, there was so much food, the people could be peaceful. In fact, as far as I know, none of these tribes even had a word for starvation because there was always plenty. Imagine this river just teeming with salmon. There were grizzly bears here, elk. Now we still have salmon, but not near what it was. And I just saw a herd of elk under the Van Dusen Bridge going out from my way home last week. I almost went off the bridge. I was so excited. But they're doing a lot of work trying to bring the salmon back. But it's so interconnected and we've made a lot of mistakes. They spent millions of dollars trying to pull logs and trees out of the rivers to free them up. And then they realized the salmon need logs to make pools and so then they spent millions to drag trees back into the rivers. And so part of what I'm excited about is this coordination with the indigenous people here and working with them and their ancestral knowledge in hoping to bring back a healthy forest and healthy rivers. I don't know that we'll ever get the grizzly back, even though it's our state animal, but I love that the parks wants us to say you are on occupied non-gadal land, and they do not exist as a tribe anymore. There are still remnants of that group, but they were taken down to Bear River Rancheria, which is down by Fortuna, Ferndale. And those rancherias were like refugee camps because after gold was discovered in California, and the 49ers came in, I think California became a state was 1850? It was shortly after, and the people here, there wasn't a lot of gold here, but they would cut down the trees and they would sell the timber as they were making grape steaks for like all our vineyards. They were turning these into grape steaks. It just makes me sick. And shingles, because they're crazy fire resistant. And so they would chop these magnificent beings down into like toothpicks and shingles, and then they would use that cleared land to raise cattle that they would sell meat to the miners and that sort of thing. And so thank God we do have some of these groves preserved, but we only have about 4.6% of old growth redwood. When they started to try to preserve this was in the 1920s, there was 80% of old growth left. And so just in that short period of time, but thank God for those people that started to think we got to do something. And I just learned this is brand new for me. Like I said, I was teaching philosophy and religion, all this metaphysical stuff, and now I'm getting to teach about biology and botany and trees. And so it's been great learning for me. But I just learned last week we can thank the automobile of all things for helping preserve redwoods. Yes. Yes, they cut 95.4% of all the old growth. No, when people first started realizing we might want to save some, there was 80% left, and that was in 1920. So, but in this last 100 years, that's how much been. So, what would that be? 64? No, 70. Right, it's been cut down since 1920. But part of why we have what's left is in the 20s they were also making the first international highways and byways because the automobile was just coming on the scene, and they called them curtains. They wanted beautiful curtains of forest and stuff when you went down the highways. And if you'll notice on this road, there is a curtain, but if you get out your Google map and you look at the satellite view, what you can't see from the highway, there's clear cut after clear cut after clear, but it gives you this illusion of driving through great forest, but it's not. But that's why this park is 120 miles long, and it's made up of little groves along the 101. And this one is 25 miles from the 101. They were able to capture a couple little groves out here. But the automobile, of all things, so wonderful for cars, I guess. All right.
Can I ask a question? Is that span all the way down? Because we've been in Muir Woods there and big there, but that's also a grove. So all the way up the coast from there, is that all redwood groves?
Yes, and I'll have some maps later where you can see the range of where it was and where it is today. Oh, this is something we always like to show people right off. If you're not familiar with poison oak, that's what it looks like, and we have it in abundance. And it only affects apparently humans and one other primate. But all the other birds and animals, it doesn't bother at all. It provides food and it's beautiful, but it messes me up. So know what it looks like. If you think you got exposed, if you use dish soap, some grease cutting soap, just pretend like you have bacon grease on you where you think it touched you, and scrub it like you're trying to get, it won't feel like bacon grease, but use that kind of force. And if you get it within 6 hours, you should be okay. If not, it's not going to kill you, but man, it's not fun. And we got ticks. And I've been noticing a lot of the other interpreters I work with are super tick paranoid. And I was kind of thinking, you're being kind of silly. Until last week, when I got back from work, I felt a little itchy in my nether regions, and it had legs, and I was like, ah! Tick. So do you want to check yourself if you're out climbing around? Also with the poison oak, it can get on your clothes, your shoes, your pets. So if I know I've been walking through it and it's on my pants, I'll usually just put those in a plastic bag until I can wash them. Yes, Maggie.
I have 2 things.
Give them to me.
I know the rhyme of poison oak.
Oh, give it to us, please.
Of 3, let it be. Yes.
And what's the furry and thorny? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Thorny or hairy, it might be a berry.
Thorny or hairy, it might be a berry. So those also have leaves of 3. But if you see there's thorns on the branches, it's probably a berry bush because poison oak doesn't have thorns. Thank you, Maggie. What are these cute little things?
Do you remember what they were?
And they live here.
Mountain lion.
That is mountain lion babies. So I have been hiking since my youth in California, and I have yet to see a mountain lion. I've seen their prints, I've seen their tracks in the snow, I've seen them on top of hikers' boots following them down the canyon, but I've never seen, although I saw one 2 days ago at the San Diego Zoo. I was down visiting my family, and I was from here to you from it in its cage, and just gorgeous. But I felt so bad for it. It was just pacing, you know, it's like, let me out, let me. And we got bears, black bears. Can you imagine the indigenous people that lived here lived with grizzly bears? And grizzly bears are a top predator. I mean, humans are on their diet. And so the last grizzly, I believe, was killed in California in 1920, 1922. And the last one that was seen was in 1924 in Sequoia National Park. And someone spotted it and it just wandered off, kind of like in the Lorax when all the trees were down. And so when the grizzlies left, the black bears moved in. And we do have black bears here. And I took a couple on a hike this afternoon across there, and there's one of those goose pin trees that's burned out, and we had a trail cam set up, and it's motion detected, and so it caught a black bear going into it, and then a couple hours later it came back out. So it just like went in and took a nap in one of the trees. Now these you've probably seen on your picnic tables and other places. And this is new stuff for me too, because I always just thought, oh, if it's like berries or apples or fruit, you know, the animals can eat it. But it's like, no, because what happens is wherever there's a road or a campground, it allows certain types of animals, like this beautiful stellar jay. It normally wouldn't be out in a place like this, but because people are here and they know they can scavenge off the tables, they'll follow the people. And so we're really trying to, it's almost like a Pavlovian response with the dog, you know, associating the music or the bell with food. They associate picnic areas with food. And so we're trying to break that connection. And so when they come into your campground, they're not going to find food. And the problem with it isn't that they're scavenging food, it's when there's not the food there, they'll start preying on the eggs of birds like the marbled merlet that we're trying to save. So that's why we're trying to keep it clean. My other ranger buddy, and when you get back, where you don't have internet this far away from the building, but he made this marbled merlet wrap. And it's pretty cute, especially for a white guy. And he gets into it. And it's got all the information I'm going to give you in like one 7-minute rap song. But I am not going to try to do it for you, because that is not my speed. I'm going to give you a talk on the marbled merlet song. So here we go. It's the seabird that lives in the forest. And there's such a great picture. Like you can see there, there's not even a nest. That bird has laid its egg on a horizontal branch on the moss. And so it just sits there in the moss, and I'll show you some other pictures later. After the chick hatches, it just hangs out on that branch, and when it poops, it kind of poops in a circle throughout the day. And by the time it's ready to fly away, there's this nice little poop bowl that the bird is sitting in. And I got a picture of that coming up. So this is the range of the marbled merlets, and we are way down there. That's Point Mendocino, so we're just a little bit north of that. So they go all the way down, there's the Bay Area, and they go all the way down. That's like Santa Barbara, right? That little elbow.
Yeah.
So those are non-breeding, and then the breeding and permanent residence starts up here by the purple, by the pink. And so as you can see, we have a lot more up in Canada and British Columbia, but they're endangered down here in the lower 48 states. And that is what a mature merlet looks like. I got a puppet here, but this is actually bigger than life size. The merlets are about in between a robin and a crow for size, so a little bit smaller than this puppet. And if you notice, what kind of bird does that look like, just from the colors? Yeah. And the marbled merlets are dark on top and light underneath, just like a penguin. But so are puffins, so are murres, so are many seabirds. Why do you think a seabird would be dark on top and light on the bottom?
Because they would like to camouflage.
Camouflage, right. But why does that work? Maggie's been here all summer. Why do you think they'd want to be dark on top and light on the bottom if you lived in the sea? And you'll notice a lot of fish have that same camouflage.
When you're looking down at it, what do you think it would see? Because it's dark like the water.
Right. And if a predator's underneath and it's looking up at it,
What's it see?
White.
Nothing.
light, right. So they have light bellies and dark tops, and that helps protect them. But, and I did not know this because I was not a biologist. Oh, and this is where they excel. These are a seabird. And if you see these wings aren't meant for flying, they're meant for swimming. They swim under the water or fly under the water. And that's where they can get away from predators and all that. When they're not on the water, that's when they're most vulnerable. So here we have our darker colors. That's what they look like in flight. Because their wings are so thin, it's almost, welcome. It's almost like a hummingbird. I'm recording, so if you don't want to be in the video, just don't get too close, but that's all right. All right, and so that's what you're looking for. And their wings are beating so fast, it's almost like a hummingbird. You just hear this like sound coming through, and I'll try to play some video later. But if you're like trying to do the birding, you want to get up about an hour before dawn, and you go to about an hour after dawn, and that is what you're looking for coming over like the riverbank. And supposedly we do have marbled merletes breeding across the creek there. And so I do want to come up and check that out. There's a good picture of one on the water. They also like to travel in pairs, which is super interesting. And usually the pairs are not their mates, at least this time of year. All right. What do you think they eat? It's a seabird. Okay, but it's a tiny seabird. So what kind of fish? They're not going to be eating a whale. Or yes. So all the little fish you find in cans, that's what they love. So they like anchovies, sardines, caplins. And then they'll also eat the babies of bigger fish, like the fry. A fry is what we call little baby fish. So of the salmon, of the pollock, sandfish. A lot of these fish I never even heard of before, like a candlefish, scorpion fish, sockeye salmon.
Scorpion fish like the scorpions rexes.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
But this is the part I think is the coolest thing of all. So people did not even know where this bird laid its eggs until 1974, when this lumberjack was climbing up one of these big old trees, and he peered over a branch, and there's just this chick sitting in the moss like that. And he was like, oh my God, it's the marbled merletes. They're living in old growth trees. And so most seabirds, of course, are nesting on crags and rocks out in the ocean. But these, what they're looking for, that tree behind you is such a great example. So they're looking for a tree at least 40 feet off the ground. These are considerably more than 40. And they're looking for a horizontal limb that's going out, that's covered in moss, and they will lay that egg just right on that limb. But they also want there to be a limb over the top of that, so if a crow or a raven or jay flies over it, they won't see the chick on the branch below. So they want overlapping horizontal branches. That tree would be perfect. And we got some really great ones across the creek. And I do want to come out and do a bird survey, because they, like I said, they are supposed to be here. There's the mama. That's the poop ring I was telling you about. The parents won't poop at the nest because they don't want to attract predators, but the chicks will poop around the nest. That's the egg. It's like a blue-green egg, about that big. Beautiful. And there's the chick. See, it's just, it doesn't have a nest. It's just sitting on a flat branch. How cool is that? And this is something I didn't know, but apparently a lot of different birds have mating colors and regular colors. So this time of year, when they're in the forest, they take this brownish and marbled colors because it looks like dappled sunlight. And you said, Kenny, did you say yours actually was more orangish, the one you found?
Oh, I was talking about a bird thresher.
Oh, a different bird. Okay. Yeah, when you said orange, I was like, wow, do they get that?
Yeah, I thought you were talking about a thresher.
Okay, yeah. So the chicks, though, and right now they should be hatched and in their fledgling stage, because they'll take flight in July, and their very first flight, they have to make it all the way to the ocean. Can you imagine when your parents said, all right, you're 18, it's time to get out of the house, and you have to leap out of a giant tree and make it to your job or your next resident, and if you don't make it, bummer for you. That's it. And they only lay one egg a year, and so this is part of why they're endangered, is they don't produce a lot of eggs or offspring, and so they really have to protect the ones that stay there. The other neat thing is they're very egalitarian. the males and females share the nesting responsibility. So the mom will be on for 24-hour shift, and then the dad will be on the egg for 24 hours, and they'll keep trading back and forth. But when you watch them fly, if you get up that early before dawn and you watch them fly to the ocean, they usually fly in pairs. But that's what I meant by it's not the mating pairs, because both of them have their spouses or their mates back at the nest, and so it's kind of like they fly to the ocean with someone else's spouse. It's like their work husband or wife. Yeah, and they keep an eye on each other, and because it's helpful to have another pair of eyes, and so they'll travel back and forth. And this time of year, they'll actually be flying back and bringing fish to their chicks up to 8 times a day. I mean, and that's a haul, but they can fly 60 miles an hour. So that's just a half hour to get from the ocean from here. Quicker than we can drive here on this road.
Yes.
At least I hope quicker than we can get here. Okay, so what do you think has caused their decline in numbers? What would be dangerous? Yes.
The ravens.
The ravens, yes. What else do you think?
What did they talk about, Lucy? What's gone? What's only 5% left?
Oh, right. That's my first one. Loss of habitat. Well, that's a sad picture. So the more of these big, because you need at least a 4-inch horizontal limb. And a tree's got to be pretty big to get a 4-inch limb. These trees are hundreds of years old. Some of them could be knocking on 1,000, I would say, in this area. But it takes a while to get trees at this level. The other is pollutants in the oceans, because like if we have poisons and plastics, they could get caught in a net, they could eat something that messes up their digestion. So it's all connected. We have to remember when we let stuff go down our drains or sewers or things like that, if it ends up in the ocean, it could mess up the things. And then this is what you were mentioning, other birds. And these type of birds are called corvids, and these are the smartest birds in the world. The ravens, incredibly intelligent, wonderful birds, but they're opportunists. And when I gave my first talk, when we pulled up the slide, actually we didn't have the slide because the power was off, and a raven flew right into camp. And then when we talked about the stellar jay, one landed right in that tree. And the people asked me afterwards, they said, were those trained animal actors? I was like, no, it was just a blessing. But we have all of these birds here. And once again, these birds are not bad. They're doing what they're supposed to do, but they're following humans because of the picnic tables. And that's why we got to keep the crumbs up, because when they're out here, they will start being opportunists, and they'll raid other birds' nests, and they will eat the merlettes' eggs or the baby chicks if they find them. So that's why we want to try to keep it clean. You'll see there's little signs on all the picnic tables, like keep it crumb clean. And this is why. Look at that little ground squirrel. We got a stellar jay, and look at that bear. And if you get a chance, go in our visitor center. All those animals you see in there are ones that died on this road. So those are all things that live here that people brought in so we could show you. But we got bears, mountain lions, foxes, squirrel, all these sorts of things. And that's part of why we need to keep it clean. So here's what you can do. Help protect old growth. Like I said, there's less than 5% left. Most of it's protected, but there's now some second growth trees that were logged 100, 150 years ago that are getting big enough that they could possibly be habitat. And that's part of why I wanted to get the training, because if you can find merlettes, you can save a growth. And I'm into trees more than birds, but I love it all. Now this is cool. People have found marbled merletes here in July. So especially mid to late July, if you are walking around on one of the trails and you find a little bird sitting there, come to the visitor center and let us know, and we'll take a box, we'll go collect it. And if you can get it to an animal help shelter, and I think we have ahnow.org, if you put in your zip code, it will tell you where to take it in your region, any kind of bird. But there's a really good success rate on these birds if you can get them in there, and they'll just make sure they're strong enough, and they'll drive them down to the ocean, kayak them out to the bay, and just let them go, and they'll find their buddies. So Um, here's one. There's a good example of how big the bird is. So there it looks like a, just a little bit bigger than the palm of your hand there. And this one has a radio tracker, so they can look and see where it's going and what it's been up to. That's a baby. So that's what you're looking for in July. If you see one of those off the side of the trail or under one of these big trees, that's what it's going to look like. Almost like a little penguin, right? And how cute. But it's not going to make it to the ocean. And I guess maybe it could stumble down into the Van Dusen and hope to float its way down, but that would be rough. And imagine all the predators that would be like, hey, what's that tasty little thing floating down the river? Oh, there it is right there. www.AH Now. So that's Animal Help Now. And they've had really great success rate. And it was so cool as I was preparing this presentation, the other ranger who wrote that rap song, he said at Prairie Creek, I think this was last year, they did a program like this on a July night, and the very next day, someone from the Campfire Program found a marbled merlet in the woods, and they followed the protocol, and they were able to, they took it down to Trinidad, and in a kayak, and just paddled it out, and it did really well. So, excellent. Here's the range of the merlets. I don't believe they have found them more than 50 miles from the coast, but so they're going to live, I mean, that would be a haul. But at 60 miles an hour, that's only an hour to get there. Any questions or comments? I'm so happy I got to show my slides tonight.
I got one.
Yes.
So the reason trail maintenance is kind of hard here is we can't run chainsaws while the merlets are nesting. So if we have a down tree, it could be down on the trail till maybe August.
Right, once we get to August, all the fledglings should have been to the sea by that point. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Anybody else? And it doesn't have to be about the birds, if it's about the trees or...
That's also why we don't allow drones.
Yes.
In merlets.
Yes, drones. It would be cool. I did see on YouTube someone did drone footage of this park, probably before it was illegal.
Oh, they also
And
probably, yeah.
it's really good. If you just Google Grizzly Creek State Park and you look through the videos, you'll see what I'm talking about. This guy did like I think an hour just flying his drone. And
is it
it's
the danger of the drone hitting it, or is it the
just
noise?
scaring it?
Just scaring it.
And because if
Out of
it
the
thinks
nest?
it's a predator,
Yeah,
it might abandon its nest or something.
I think you need to have a license and 2 other like rigorous permits
Right.
to even film in here. They just don't need them out.
It would be helpful for guys, researching.
Yeah, I mean, I could see legitimate uses, or people did it by permit.
Yeah.
They just don't want everyone and their
No.
brother bringing their drone out,
Drones are
having
good.
drone fights over the lake, over the creek. But part of what I like about Grizzly Creek, one, it's away from all the other parks, and you kind of have a different feel out here. But we have this right here is an example of what we call a cathedral tree. So it's one base, but you have multiple trunks all growing out of the same base. And you can walk around it. There's at least 4 matured trunks coming off that tree. And that big oozing thing coming out the middle, that's a burl. And the burls contain, it's kind of like human stem cells. It's undifferentiated cells, so they could become another trunk. It could become roots, it could become leaves, and it could, whatever the tree needs. And if that tree fell down, a whole new tree could grow from that wart just coming off there. And that's part of these sequoias are called Sequoia sempervirens, which is Latin for ever living. And that's how they propagate, is by sending up like shoots or suckers out from their sides.
Very funny.
Thank you. Like, see that little guy? This is this tree. And if you did a genetic test of this tree, it would be the same as this tree. Like an identical twin. And sometimes they will grow all the way around the tree, and we call that fairy rings. And when the mother tree dies, you'll have a ring of trees growing around this central place. And it's just magical. And one more feature we have, they're called candelabra trees, and where you have one trunk, and then you have multiple trunks coming up. So it looks like a candlestick.
They call them chandelier trees.
Yeah, what did I call it?
They're called chandelier trees.
You said candelabra.
Yeah, well, chandelier hangs from the.
No, but they call them chandeliers so they go out.
Really?
That's what
I'm
Richardson
sticking
Grove
with
called them.
candelabra because it. Yeah,
It's, I don't know, Richardson Grove called them chandelier trees.
interesting. Well, look, but those are all the features connected with them sending up those fairies or those suckers or those clones, and it would be like if someone cut off your hand, and instead of you just having a nub, it's like your hand would grow like 5 more hands. Or if like someone cut off your finger, it would grow like more fingers. And so that's how these trees grow, and that's how they get so trippy. And I know there's a gallery in Eureka called Mini Hands Gallery, and they sell little hands you can stick on your finger. And I need to get some for my talk, because that's exactly what they're doing. It's like little reiterations of themselves growing and growing and growing. And that's part of why it's so hard to tell how old these trees are, because this, if we like counted the rings, this might only have like 3 rings. But you have to remember, it's as old as this. But it only looks like 3 years old, but it's a continuation of this. And this could be a continuation of a tree we can't see anymore. And on and on. All right, well, thanks so much for coming out tonight. What's that?
Where's its branches?
This is its branch.
It really is like Christmas
And then
here.
its first branch, you see the redwoods, they like to drop their lower branches. That's probably another good fire prevention thing, right? But they get up there, and you have to be careful on windy days because they will cast off branches, and sometimes they will land into the ground just like a big spear. But look at the size of those. Some of those branches are like trees, and they call them widow makers because they just come down like giant spears. I haven't got freaked out enough yet because I love to be in the woods when it's windy, because it sounds like if you've ever been to the ocean with wooden ships on the dock and that squeaking of the wood rubbing together, like,
Freaky dog.
or like whales. And I just can't get enough of it. I'd like to be in there and hearing that, but I'm trying to be careful. All right. Well, thanks for coming out. I'm going to linger a bit if you want to ask more questions, but I'm going to shut this off. Hey.
Did you find your book?